Spectrovision Radio.
Welcome back to Gods, Ghosts, and UFOs. My name is Jordan, and I'm here with my very last friend in the whole wide world, Tom, after the both of us have been abandoned by Mallory.
Oh, no!
JK. She'll be back, finally, next week, thank heavens, and we'll go back to our regular programming. In the meantime, and in petty retribution for her absence,
Wow!
we asked Robin Lassiter to come onto the show today, because we know Mal will be devastated to miss this, so
leave me out of this.
She'll think I'm just going to keep using the royal we.
Okay, the royal we.
So maybe she'll think twice about next time about going on mystical adventures without us, the royal us, including Tom. Okay.
Abandonment issues. The name of the show is Abandonment Issues. We've asked Robin to come on to help.
Yes, thank you, Robin, for joining us. Robin Lassiter is an author, a podcaster, and a spirit guide. When we had Kelly Chase on last week, she called you, Robin, an angel. And I don't think she was speaking metaphorically. Robin, I've also heard rumors that you're capable of bending spoons with your mind, but we don't have to go there if you don't want to. Kelly is actually the reason I found out about you, since you had her on your own show a while back called Earth, a Love Story, and it's wonderful, and I highly recommend it. And at the end of the episode you had Kelly on, you riffed for a while on the kinds of communities you're working to build. And you said, let's bring back the mystery schools for the brokenhearted, which hit me so hard it left a mark. So I had to start listening to your podcast from the beginning, which turned out to be your own audio production of your book, Earth, a Love Story. And it shifted things around in some deep places I couldn't name. And I've been dying to do exactly what we're doing right now ever since. So thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for that very generous, lovely introduction. I'm really happy to be here with you, Jordan and Tom. Thank you.
We were talking before the show while Jordan was having to wade through the thicket of technical difficulties, and we were talking about the idea of the sort of practical application of learning certain skill sets through the great fiery kiln of like paranormal experience. And this is very much your story, isn't it? That you have probably for your whole life had experiences that we would lump into the big basket labeled paranormal. And that through, at the very least, difficulty, you acquired some ways of dealing with these challenges. And I would love for you to talk about that and how you were able to do that and make your crooked path a little straighter.
Yeah, I spent most of my life not understanding any of this and compartmentalizing it very strongly into different hidden chambers in myself. It wasn't safe to talk about it in public. I didn't have support for it. I didn't understand it. And there was a lot of trauma and grief and confusion and difficulty, and also mystery and magic and extraordinary experiences that broke open the idea of consensus reality. And without help or structure or framework or guides, it was really confusing and challenging. And yeah,
could you
and
high
then
spot some examples of like the experiences that you had that were upsetting and knocked you out of frame?
Yeah. I mean, some of my earliest memories were being taken out of my body as a kid. And I didn't know that that's what was happening, but I would find myself traveling with presence and could see from a height, so I could see my house below me and the valley that I lived in below me, and then there would be travel. And sometimes these experiences I would also be shown what I called Armageddon visions, these visions of the earth being destroyed or people in chaos and bombs going off and fires and refugees and really difficult subject matter. And then often was given this sense of pressure or mission that I needed to do something about this, and then have the experience of kind of slamming back into my body. And I only have words and framework for this now, because of course at 4 or 5 years old, there's no differentiation between what's inside and outside or what is normal and not normal. So those were some of the earliest experiences that felt that looking back were this trauma, this shock of a different kind of reality. Beings visiting me at night, often just a sense of terror, a sense of real fear. I'm trying to think. I've done so much integration around all of this, actually, that it's hard to remember the exact moments that were very fearful. I can
That's a
say
lot right there.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
That may be enough.
No pressure,
It's a big one.
4-year-old Robin, that you're on a mission to save the world. Good God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what do I do with this?
Did you try? Did you try to tell or share or explain, or not explain, but just go like, "Hi, I'm struggling over here."
Right, to a parent figure or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think with those experiences, those very early 4-year-old, I didn't have I didn't have even the language or the ability to do that. The first time I remember trying to talk about something was maybe somewhere between 7, 8 years old, something like that. I don't know exactly when, but I was still writing in block letters. Like I hadn't changed to cursive. So whatever that age was. And I was being visited by these two people, a man and a woman, who would kind of show up in matching rocking chairs and elderly, and they would talk to me, and I knew that they were dead. And I would sort of transcribe these conversations that we would have. And I did share that with my family, who were, I'm not angry at my family for this. They're lovely people. But it scared them that I was talking to dead people, and they wondered why. And so I understood very quickly not to talk about these things, that I wasn't going to get answers, and I was going to get sort of questioned or sort of this pressure around trying to describe something or defend something that I barely knew what was happening to begin with. So over time, I just stopped talking about it.
And then maybe the added pressure of, to some degree, being made to feel responsible for other people's feelings, that you might be saying things that are upsetting to them that they don't want to hear. So now you have to watch out for them as much as take care of your own self.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Don't rock the boat. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And we don't need to have paranormal experiences to be made to feel that way as children.
Right.
I mean, that's part of the reason why I want to talk to you about these things, is that there are lots of things in the world that can be upsetting or alienating or marginalizing or frightening or threatening. And it doesn't have to be talking to dead people in rocking chairs or having an out-of-body experience. It can be other things. So these strategies, these concepts that I was talking to you about earlier that you've been able to incorporate will be of tremendous value to anyone, not just, quote unquote experiencers. There, I'm stepping down now, Jordan, stepping off the soapbox.
Well, you mentioned having done a lot of integration work, and that's definitely something, I'm relatively recent in my familiarity with your work, with your writing, and with your podcast, and with your conversations you've had. But when I become a fan of someone, I tend to go deep quickly and just consume a lot of material. So I feel like I've heard a lot of what you have to say about your experiences, and one of the things that has impressed me is that it almost you do seem integrated in the way that you talk about your past experiences, and I wonder if it's become increasingly difficult for you to distinguish between experiences that other people would deem like non-normal, paranormal, whatever, and just like regular life, sort of waking up and doing things.
It's a great question. I feel like I have integrated so much of it for me. So when I do have experiences that would be considered outside of consensus reality, I don't have ontological shock around them for the most part. It still happens sometimes, but for the most part, it's become part of the landscape of information, internal and external, that I receive and work with. I work with clients a lot, and I very much can still see where that line is when I'm working with someone else. I can see, and it's different for different people. And actually, a huge part of my work is trauma and the body and somatics and things like that, because what I've found is where this is the vessel that the information is coming through. So for one person, an experience like a lucid dream could be enough to destabilize reality and come through in a way that makes them question and not understand. And for another person, that could be seeing a UFO. And for someone else, it can be trauma. As you said, Tom, like, doesn't have to be paranormal. I'm distinguishing less between paranormal and normal. And the context and framework that I have now seems to be, where are parts of us still exiled or cut away or not allowed? And those are personal parts and also the collective. Like, what does the collective not accept or think is okay? And I can feel that in people when I work with them. So that line is definitely clear. And also my filter for what sort of normal and not normal has gotten very thin, or that context has gotten much broader. I see these as human capacities and experiences, and they don't fall outside of some sense of normal or not. So complex, but yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, that makes sense. Like, if I could summarize maybe, or put it in my own words, and you can let me know whether or not this is an accurate representation of what you just said, but that for you, it's kind of like that line has blurred to the point of being less meaningful. But then you can still see, sort of from the perspective of other people, where experiences you have currently or have had may seem like outside the pale, so to speak. And so then it's a lot of bridge building for you in terms of communication with both you people you work with, or anytime you're having these conversations, you're going to have to identify on some level, like, what's going to feel weird for them versus, things that you may feel like, this doesn't really feel weird for me, but I understand it might feel weird for you. Is that kind of like...
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. And also more broadly in the culture, that I can see some people really having a tremendously difficult time with what's happening in kind of public disclosure or government disclosure and those areas. And I have not very much sort of interest or activation around that. I keep an eye on it.
Sure.
I do think it's interesting. It's a huge part of this. And also, I know that it's real. I know that they exist, that I've crossed that threshold. And so that has become part of my reality, and it's not as shocking to me. And I fully understand that other people are like, what is happening? The world's going crazy, and there's UFOs, and the government's talking about it, and this is, and that can be really difficult. Yeah.
Oh my God, there's so much to talk about. Jordan, you want to follow up?
Yeah, I just was going to say, well, it strikes me too that we've already mentioned how, it's not super meaningful necessarily to distinguish between some of these different kinds of experiences. It may be the broader category here is destabilization or ontological shock, or whatever you want to call it. That can happen in like the regular news too. Like I consume enough media to know that, like, I mean, people are losing their minds because trust in traditional institutions is breaking down. We talk about this a lot on our show. And, it could just be a news story that you wake up to one morning that runs in the New York Times or some other publication that you might trust, and someone is dropping a piece of information that really shatters your worldview. And that's really, really challenging. It could have nothing to do with like UFOs or spirit animals or whatever. It's just regular stuff, just like a politician that you trusted, or an institution that there's a scandal, or there's some sort of celebrity that's done something horrible, and like suddenly you're thinking, wait a second, this isn't the world that I thought I was part of. Maybe a lot of the things that we like to talk about on our show and that you have had a lot of experiences with, maybe that could be, in at least some contexts, usefully lumped together with all the other kinds of, destabilizing things that people hear or experience.
Absolutely. I have a history of addiction and recovery, and even in that realm, a lot of people who have been addicts their world is completely different than much of the consensus reality world. And so I think that people who have had what would be considered by the mainstream sort of alternative lives, or lives that didn't follow the mainstream idea of what we're supposed to be doing and how the world is. And that includes experiencers. It includes people who've had shock and loss at some point in their life that completely changed the way that they think about things. It is that, breaking of the worldview that creates this opening. And if someone has gone on that journey and gone through that threshold, or across that threshold of having their world crack and realizing that reality isn't what I thought that it was, and then navigating that and coming through to the other side with a broader view, with an ability to hold paradox or ability to be in a larger landscape and stable in the instability. You know, I had teachers and mentors that were so helpful for me in all of this. And one of the things that they said was being comfortable in the liminal is sort of the price of entry to what's coming on the planet. And all of these shocks and losses, whether it be, or, you know, the shocks that could be a loss or that could be a UFO or could be a precognitive experience or a near-death experience or something like that, can become developmental and spiritual in the journey of integrating those ontologically shocking moments. And so it becomes not only a way to sort of survive it and make sense of it, but can bring us into a place where we can hold more steadiness as the world gets weirder and stranger and trickier. And that can be a stabilizing force, I think, for people around us as things get wilder.
I'm reminded of Heraclitus said, all things come about by strife. And, you know, the trauma of these experiences leading you and others to, you know, try to make sense of them, excuse me, in a new way. The, you know, ontological shock is real, and narrative closure is real. And there's a lot of push and pull there. But the older that I've gotten, or the more that I've experienced, or the more that I've been in this liminal space, the more I've noticed that there may be a causal relationship between trauma and increased sensitivity or knowledge.
Absolutely. There's a question, you know, did the trauma come first or did the experience come first, you know? And how are they interwoven? And there does seem to be a correlation there for sure. I'm sort of feeling this like call and this little voice that keeps wanting to bring this part in. And so I will, and if it takes us down a different track or if you want to bring us back to something, that's fine.
Let's
go. But I'm feeling, yeah, great. One of the things that I was given was this very big mouthful of a mission during one of my experiences with these beings that eventually I started to work with. And what they said was, and I hold this lightly, right? Like, I don't even know what is capital T true anymore, but this is a very functional story for me, is that I was given this big mission, you know, to be part of moving the planet from the paradigm of evolution through suffering to the paradigm of evolution through joy and creativity. And what we're talking about is evolution through suffering, that there's a trauma and that there's strife, and that in the process of working with that and overcoming that, if we're lucky, right? Because not everybody it's not inevitable that we get through these things. But in that process, that we evolve, that there's an evolutionary process that happens through suffering. And that makes sense to me. Evolution through suffering totally works. It has worked most of my life. There was suffering, things got so hard that I couldn't bear it, something changed in that moment. And it's grace, like this grace will arrive at the depth of suffering that is really powerful and beautiful, and evolution through suffering works. And I also feel that it's very slow. You know, there's this great quote from this sage that I can't remember the name, but I was told this by one of my teachers that, you know, imagine a swallow carrying a silk scarf across a mountaintop, and as many times as it takes for that silk scarf to wear down the mountain, that's how many lifetimes it takes to like get through, basically my words, evolution through suffering. So it takes a very, very long time. And
Thanks, Buddha.
I know, it's a lot. It's like, whew, okay. Yeah. This is a lot.
Yeah. Cool.
And so, yeah, cool, great. That's what I felt when I heard that. I was like, I don't know, man. I would like the other path. I would like another path. You know? And the other one sounds, you know, what they said is evolution through joy and creativity being this primal human lineage, and that we are creative beings. And can we learn to evolve through joy and creativity? And then the other thing I'll say is that as I've worked with this for many, many years, what we in the West tend to do is, oh, if there's another option, if we're going to go through evolution through joy and creativity, let's skip over the suffering part. And we're going to spiritual bypass our way to heaven.
I'd like the easy,
yeah. I'm just going to think happy thoughts and only
I'll take
do
that one.
Yeah, exactly. Just never think a bad thought and never be scared. And only, it's all ascension. It's up, it's away, it's leaving the body, it's leaving, suffering behind. And that's not it, actually. It's actually deepening into the human experience. I'm I don't want to label myself one way or the other, but I'm more of a descensionist. I'm more of a coming down and into the human experience. And through that full acceptance and recognition that evolution through suffering works and not rejecting that at all, no resistance to that, full acceptance of that, it seems that this other doorway opens up where evolution through joy and creativity are possible. And I think that that's one of the confluences of many things that we're sitting at as humans right now.
No, we're not we're dealing with big issues right now, because we're not dealing with big issues at all right now. In the town I once lived, some young Muslims were shot to death. And at the time I was writing for Al Jazeera America, and I went to their memorial service. It was just horrible. And sad beyond description. And someone got up and talked about how you don't build your house on a bridge. And they were talking about this world and how this world, yes, it's important to be kind and whatever, but this world is not the real. This is not the real thing. And I think about Buddhism and the idea that, the worldling will see enlightenment as annihilation, and the nature of life is desire and suffering, and you're going to be stuck on this hamster wheel until you can step off of it. And that's what we want to do, right? We want to step off of it. But I'm I really understand. And sometimes this world seems profligately cruel. And you go, why? Good Lord. Why is there so much here I can't change or address? What is it that I need to learn? Just let me learn it. Let me get off. Let me get out of this, because this hurts. It hurts a lot. But also, clearly, there's a point to it, right? If we are the arbiters of meaning, if we see a coincidence but call it synchronicity, it's because we have invested it with meaning, right? So therefore we are here not to suffer pointlessly, but I think there is a part of this 3D experience where the rubber hits the road. Mm-hmm. That's just one thing that went into my head. The other thing was, when you're talking about creativity, I thought of my beloved card and co-creation. This is the magician in the Atelier deck. Look at him. He's got a little guy that he's doing there, as above, so below. And if you look at the nature of magic with a K, hermeticism, esotericism, or even what we were talking with Kelly Chase about with respect to paranormal experiences, there is a co-creative element to them. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that we are inventing fictions. It means that we are there's a collaborative nature to the Atman and the Brahman, the ourself and the other with whom we are experiencing. Does that resonate with you, and can you speak to that?
Yeah, and thank you so much for that. And I will say, to what you said about how hard it is here, and are we suffering needlessly? And I just want to say a big yes. Actually, so much of my suffering came from pushing away suffering.
Right.
And yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like when you get a massage for the first time and you're like, ow, it hurts, and you tighten up. Guess what? You're making it hurt worse.
Right.
By resistance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it feels like this long journey to acceptance, and I call it touching bottom, before some sort of transformation can occur. That's a broad statement. I don't know. But there is something about going down and touching bottom, this full acceptance and lack of resistance about the nature of suffering here. And that the more that we can fully accept that and let grief touch us and let our hearts break, actually, that there is something transformational that happens in that process. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that in, because it's so true. And then this idea of co-creation, evolution through joy and creativity, it's still a mystery to me. I'm a few years into exploring it and navigating it. And it is as you say, that there is some sort of dance here between things, and that there is a co-creative process, and it is not as simple as it's portrayed. Because if the think happy thoughts and only good things will happen worked, if it were that simple, we would all do it, and we would end wars. We would just do, it would be done. And that's what we want. We want to end suffering. I believe that's, as humans, like, we want goodness. We want to end suffering. And
we
yes,
don't
please.
want to suffer. I'm always trying to find where the thing is to do. I mean, this is just how we're wired, right? Like, I'm hearing wisdom, or I'm hearing an idea, or I'm hearing something, and like, what do I do? What do I do with it? Like, I love what you said, that some of your greatest suffering was the product of resisting suffering. It's saying, I don't want to feel this pain, and then you do all kinds of things that make more pain, that just sort of compound the pain. And I think we should, if we have any kind of maturity, we should all be familiar with this process. Like, we've all done, like, we can all look back on a time where we were in avoidance of one thing, an avoidance of one type of pain. We created a lot more pain. Talk about creativity. And I think that, I wonder whether the only thing that we really have control over, because you just can't stop the suffering. You can't say, I don't want to suffer, and therefore, like, there is no solution to the suffering. There is no, like, I'm going to solve it and not feel it anymore. Like, that's not how it works. I think that you're absolutely right, that there is, the process is just acceptance. Because I'm always thinking, well, what is the thing to learn? And I think maybe the only thing to learn, the only thing we're capable of doing, is deciding whether or not we're going to open ourselves up to the reality of our experience, or whether we will resist it and close down, or whether we'll sort of recoil in fear, or whether we'll sort of embrace it in love, which is the idea of embracing suffering with like openness is almost impossible for us to like accept. But that's the point. And that to the degree that you do that, you open up the other path. I think that maybe you can only evolve through creativity and joy if you are touching ground, like you said. Like, if you've touched ground, if you like are completely, fully accepting of whatever the present suffering might be, then that allows you to get through it to the other side of being able to create from that place. But all the while that we're resisting, and I'm an expert resistor. I'm 40 years old, and I'm so good. I have like become a master at resisting suffering and then creating more suffering. And so I really, I'm trying. This is the thing that I'm trying to learn, is that like all of my smart ideas are not worth anything. Like, all I have to do is choose to accept in the current moment. And I'm not good at it. I don't know how. I'd be curious. How do you do that, Robin? How do you say, okay, I will let this suffering happen?
Can I add something? Because this is such a dovetail, I'd be remiss not to. Because earlier, Robin, you talked about addiction. And then when you're talking about, we need to bottom out in order to embrace, that's the alcoholic's creed, whatever. You're going to have to hit rock bottom, Mm-hmm. And when I was a younger man in my touring days, I had two modes, which was high awake and drunk asleep. And so you can, part of the avoidance of suffering can just be numbing yourself out, or just getting completely out of your head, so you don't have to feel the feelings or whatever. So I understand that. And so I just wanted to go, hi, I hear you, and I see you on addiction. And then, of course, beyond all that, the whole, like, I'm having an experience that is not only entirely rejected by consensus reality, it would be, a direct threat to me if I admitted to this. I could be institutionalized, or I could just, something not great could happen to me. And so I'm going to need to put that in a box that's damaging. So what strategies are available to us to maintain that kind of compartmentalization? Tequila?
Yeah, works
I mean,
great.
you know what I mean? In terms of what this culture provides, which, not a big help, but I'm just, yeah.
There are so many beverages. It's really amazing.
Yeah,
That's right. So many. I love this. This is like my jam right now. It's so good to have this conversation, because this is the question. This is the question. And what do we do about it? How do we do this? Why do we resist, and how can we resist less? And where it's led me is to an questioning of the entire framework that we operate from. And it's taken me back to explore what happened in the West, which is where I am and what I know a little bit about. I can't speak for the whole world, but what I can say is that for a really, really long time, humans lived a particular way that we've called matriarchy. And then at some point, it shifted. We were very connected to nature. We received power from nature. And that at some point there was a split that happened. And it happened with, instead of being deeply connected to the earth, we started being connected to a solar god. We went from polytheism to monotheism. And there was this expression to individuate and go up and out. And the same time agriculture came along, and at the same time animal husbandry came along. And we moved into a power over nature framework. And when we did that, we also split away these parts of ourselves that were not okay anymore. And that includes the feeling body and emotions and the dark mysteries of life, death and these mysterious other worlds that we have connection with. And as this progressed, particularly in religion, the sort of chaste and pure got held up as the thing to be, and everything that wasn't that got pushed into what I call the underworld. And so it's our collective shadow. The underworld is just our collective shadow. All the things that we're not supposed to look at. And one of those things is what we're talking about, which is suffering. So my point to all of that is it makes sense that we don't know how to do this because we have collectively forgotten. And one of the stories that I think is a really beautiful guide in this time is The Descent of Inanna. And it's really what she's talking about. It's about, the feminine archetype going down and meeting the pain of the world. And what happens when Inanna goes down to meet the pain of the world, which is her sister Ereshkigal, who is grieving the death of her husband. When she goes down to meet her sister slaughters her in her tracks and hangs her on a meat hook on the wall. And that's what going down and feeling these feelings can feel like. That's why we don't want to do it. It does shatter us. It does annihilate us. And so what I will say is how do we do this? Slowly and with great love and care for ourselves and understanding that, of course, we don't know how to do it. And then the deeper thing that wants to come through or another thing that wants to come through is that in these spaces, grief is the teacher. And grief is the teacher because you cannot negotiate with grief. I used to say, I tried every door and fell down on every floor. There was nothing else to do but surrender, but feel. There's this idea and these concepts that we have to figure out how to do this and get through this and have a strategy. And grief will just take you to your knees. And there's wisdom in that. And I think that the fact that we don't know how to grieve together anymore, and we can't look at the suffering. We can barely look at our own suffering. It's really difficult to look at our collective suffering. And so what do? We numb ourselves. There are lots of drinks. There are lots of things in my phone. I can scroll all day and not feel a feeling or feel a happy feeling for 30 seconds and then feel a sad feeling for 30 seconds. That's all coming in at me, right? We construct a lot of ways not to feel. Francis Weller, who's he doesn't know this, but he's one of my mentors. He just mentors me from his books and from a distance, but he's such a beautiful thinker around grief. And he said something like, we may not make it as humans, but if we do, he says, I think it will be because of the broken heart, because grief reminds us that we care about each other and that we care about the earth and that we care about animals. And so in my work and in my world, grief is the teacher. And I also say, how do we start talking about UFOs and end up at feeling our feelings? And the talk that we've had today is how this has happened for me.
A week after I was separated from my first wife, my three-year-old son was diagnosed with leukemia, and I was ushered into a new world. And that world was part of the ways in which our society assiduously separates us from suffering and death and illness. And I became acquainted with the pediatric oncology ward, where it's all right there. Now, he had what they call the good cancer, which is a term I never would have used until I had that experience. And I was like, oh, Christ, there is a good cancer, which is the type of leukemia that is, at the time that he got it, 95% survivable. Of course, I never played those odds. I could not play those odds. He was 3. And I was just like, is there a ticket I can get punched to trade places? No. Okay, cool. And, when I was his age, it was 5% survivable. So it was great. And he ended up with the amazing, the guy, the head of the program. It's great. He kicked it. It was wonderful. But kids didn't make it. It was really hard. And so I would come up the elevator door would open. To my right would be a window with a plant. This was on the 5th floor. To my left would be the big double doors, and you had to show your face, and they'd open the door, and there you would see all the fat, bald kids. And sometimes they'd have burn victims there. And these were just kids. I remember really wanting to just jump out of that window. I just wanted to jump out of that window because I didn't want to hurt anymore. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to suffer anymore. It was so hard. And I think about the word harrowing, which of course we use to mean something terrifying, right? But it's an agricultural term. It means to break the earth, like to break up the earth in order to plant the seed, like with a plow. And I think of when Christ, the stories about Christ, the harrowing of hell, where he also visits the underground and the dark place and the horrible place after his physical death, and harrows that and brings that out into the open and brings air and light into that, before his ascension. I'm not preaching. I don't consider myself a Christian, but I'm just saying that we still use that word and what we think it means was not its original meaning, and its original meaning is still relevant to us. Because when that ground is opened like that and cracked open and broken open, the seeds find purchase.
Oh, it's really
So
beautiful,
powerful,
Tom.
and thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm Mr. Confessional today, but I love your energy, and no one is excused from suffering. I don't feel like I've suffered more than anybody else, But when I've talked about Tong Len before, and my understanding of it, which is revere your enemy. Because they're the ones who are actually teaching you. And when you talk about grief and loss and suffering and hard, huge obstacles, and you're like, ow, that's opportunity, right? That adversity is the open door.
I want to ask, we've talked about kind of like addiction and how that is a kind of an avoidance of suffering. But the tricky thing about addiction is that it's not an entirely conscious avoidance of suffering. Like, there are things that we do when we are, choosing very specifically to avoid a thing. And when we do that, there is another option. The other option is to choose instead to confront the thing, the suffering, the grief, the pain, that thing that we're afraid of, and to let it ground us into that sort of transition to, hopefully, evolution through joy and creativity, only after we've confronted and faced and accepted and integrated that suffering. But when you're an addict, you don't think. You just do. You just over and over and over again, you are sort of you are habituated to avoidance. And one of the things that strikes me about our modern culture, and one of the things that terrifies me about our modern culture and about my own relationship to that culture, is that everybody, including myself, seems to be addicted to things that are not catastrophically destructive. So what I mean is, when you talk about alcoholism, people get it. It's like, I could die in a gutter. Okay. And often people wind up in really dire straits if their alcoholism takes them far enough. Drugs, same thing. There's lots of sort of big A addictions that we're familiar with and that we've culturally accepted as these are diseases. These will destroy people. These will bring you to your knees. And often, and I think most of our recovery programs are built around the sort of inevitability of a rock bottom in those kinds of big A addictions, when they're destroying your body, they're destroying your life, etc. I think almost everybody is addicted like horribly addicted to things that are not destroying their life so obviously, things that don't have a rock bottom, because as it turns out, rock bottoms are not profitable. And I think Tom is very fond of castigating sort of our capitalist culture, and he's not wrong. That
No,
a lot
I'm
of the
not.
things that we, you know, that we have invented and that we produce and that we sell and are like just insanely consumer society, you don't want your drug to kill people or destroy their lives, because then they become not economically viable anymore, and then they can't buy your stuff. And so I think that like the thing that most of us are addicted to are social media, news, porn, whatever, right? It's the thing that we can just get on this screen anytime we want. And it's in
Fear
your
and
pocket.
anger. Fear and
Yeah,
anger.
you can distract yourself indefinitely from the reality of your suffering, from the reality of grief. You can distract yourself infinitely and never really hit a bottom of that. Like you mentioned, like I can get 30 seconds of joy or 30 seconds of pleasure or 30 seconds of sadness or whatever, right? And that's just the, you know, TikTok amazed me. And I should cut this part probably, but I'm just going to say it anyway. TikTok amazed me because it seemed like it had finally hacked the system, because people were getting away from Facebook because they noticed that they would feel bad after spending hours of scrolling a Facebook feed. People were quitting Instagram because of the same thing. People aren't quitting TikTok because it doesn't make them feel bad enough, because they're sitting there and they're like, I feel kind of okay. And 4 hours later, they're like, I feel fine. And then they go back to it again, like as soon as they can, because it feels good and it doesn't make them feel bad. And you can spend your whole life that way. And so the great fear that I have for myself and for anyone else who struggles with like just putting the phone down is that, you know, you fast forward basically through your life for, you know, a day, a week, a month, 10 years. And you get to the end of that and you're like, I just traded most of my life, most of the substance of my life for nothing. And that to me, that is a catastrophe, but it's not one that hits you hard enough to recognize until it's already been done. I would love your insights into how do you deal with an addiction that isn't destroying your life. You know,
my gosh.
How do you deal with any number of these things? Like, what would you do, or what advice would you have for someone who's like, I don't know what to do? You know, like, I mean, there's strategies, there's tactics, sure, for like whatever, but I think that it's always the solution. The real solution is always deeper, is always more spiritual.
I love all of that so much. Yeah, thank you. It's so true. And as you're talking about it, I'm feeling grief about it. Like, oh my God, it's, you know, I know it personally. I think we all know it personally, and I can feel it in the collective. And it feels in my body like this great sort of sorrow or collapse, or it's in my body. It feels like a collapse. In my body, it feels just like a dropping of vitality. And so I can really feel that as you're talking about it. And you know, two things come up. One of the things that you're talking about is choice, right? That if you're an addict, you don't have choice. And I know that, and I believe that. And in our unconscious behaviors, we don't have choice. It is the past expressing into the present moment. And we don't have choice in that expression of the present moment. And one of the things that these beings told me in this series of, I had a series of dreams / other kinds of teaching experiences. And one of the things that I was told is that before you cross a threshold, all of the bodies have to be in close enough resonance to cross the threshold together. And by all of the bodies, I think they meant like physical body, emotional body, mental body, astral body, causal body. Like all of our multidimensional bodies have to be in close enough resonance before you cross the threshold. They gave me that 20 years ago, and I still am working with it. But one of the ways that is making sense to me now is all of the work that's come out in somatics and how we hold trauma in the body, and how, you know, dissociating a little bit, which is what we do on our phones all the time. And like, no shade to dissociation. It's a necessary survival mechanism that humans have come up with, right? So it's like not a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dissociation
I
is not a
physically
problem.
tried to leave my body when I found my mom was dying. When my brother called me and said my mom was dying, I dissociated like a son of a bitch on the sidewalk. I wasn't able to leave my body, but I was like, I don't know what that was. And then years later, my Emrys was like, you dissociated. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, no shade. Happens.
No shade. Makes sense. It's protective. All of these things, like, we're so deeply enculturated to just look at all the ways that we think that we're pieces of shit. I'm sorry for that language, but it's like all the ways we're failing, all the ways we're not doing it right, all the ways if we could just do X, Y, Z, then it would be better. We don't have choice. Like you said, Jordan, like in that moment, we don't have choice. And so somatics, shadow work, all of these things bring light into those unconscious places, both in the body and in our psyches. And as that's liberated, we have more choice. We are able to choose more than we were before. So there are pathways to create more choice. And then the second part, I'm so grateful for this conversation because it's bringing up so many things that are alive for me right now. And the other part that wants to come through is like, what do we do about this? And how do we, this great grief that you have, this great, like, I don't want to name it for you, but what I feel in response to you saying this big fear that you have, that personally and collectively, we're going to get to the end of this very precious life. Be like, oh my God, I wasted it looking at cat videos. What the how did that happen? And I fear that as well. Jordan.
No shade to cat videos.
No shade to cat videos. Sometimes you need a cat video. Sometimes you really need a cat video. Yeah, 100%, 100%. But that's what the Mystery School for the Brokenhearted is. And the Mystery School for the Brokenhearted, it's forming in me. But what I know is that it's this story that I was given about the Descent of Inanna, which is our oldest written epic poem. The Descent of Inanna is our oldest written epic poem, and it was written in cuneiform on tablets that were shattered, and then they found them, and they like pieced them back together and translated this incredible epic poem. It's just, it's extraordinary. There's a really good translation. And in this story...
Could you share that translation with us? The translation that you like, because that's going in. We have a little thing on Substack called From the GGU Library.
Oh, good, yes.
The Kabbalion and the Gospel of Thomas. Well, you better believe this is going in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I can never remember the exact title, but it's something like Inanna's Sumerian Stories and Hymns, but it's Diane Wolkstein, and I'll send it to you guys. I'll make sure that you get it.
Thank you.
That you'll get it.
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
Good.
And it's about the feminine, the development of the feminine psyche. And also, to me, she is the part that we need to reclaim in order to go forward in the world. So I think it applies to everyone. And we all, of course, have these archetypes inside of us, regardless of gender. So,
thank you.
Yes, yeah. There's tons of work to be done around that, and that's part of my very love. Like, I love that work. But Inanna went to the underworld on purpose. There's a lot of stories about like Persephone being dragged down to the underworld and people being dragged, which we all have, right? The moment when the shock happens or when the illness occurs, or we're being dragged down to the underworld. But but Inanna went on purpose. And she told everybody, she's like, I'm going down to the underworld to visit my sister for her husband's funeral. And they said, don't go. It's a terrible idea. You won't come back. You don't make it out alive. Don't go. And she said, I'm going. And she didn't know what she was getting into, but she chose to go into the underworld. And so what do? My work is to create communities and frameworks to help people choose to go down. And you can only choose when enough of sort of the body shadow, I call it the body shadow, the thing that's held inside of us from the past, when enough of that has been liberated or transformed or integrated or whatever that framework is, that we have more choice and can come into more presence. And from that place of choice and presence, we can say, I'm going down to the underworld. I'm going to go look at the things that I'm afraid to look at. I'm going to go on this deep interior. I'm going to go touch grief. I'm going to find the bottom. I'm going to find the bottom. And it is not a journey for the faint of heart. And it is half the time I'm like, why do I ask people to do this? It's so hard. And I have to just hold the truth that I know that we go down and we come up, and that there's a death, and with every death there's a birth, and that we go through this process of transformation. And then we do the great work of our souls that we came here to do. And that's what life is about. And that's why we're here. And it's also a reclaiming of, down in the underworld is the grief, is the rage at what's happening to our planet. It's also the parts of being human that in our culture today are absolutely not accepted. So the underworld contains mystical experience. The underworld contains the fact that UFOs are real. The underworld contains all paranormal experience, and it contains the mystery. We're not going to get all the answers. That's part of the deal. And that's part of accepting as well that paradox and that liminality of life. And so the mystery school for the brokenhearted is like, with community, we go down. That's the other thing I thought of, Tom, when you were talking about your son and being in that hospital, is for most of human history, we did not grieve alone. And we didn't go through these things alone. We did it in community, and we have completely lost that. And as institutions are breaking up, and I don't want to project onto your experience.
No. I want to button in my experience, because you're right. I met people on that ward. The most dedicated group of people I've ever met were the people who worked on that ward. The most extraordinary people I've ever met. The people who saved my son's life. And so when I came out of that experience, I developed a saying about it, which was, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Mm. It wasn't that it didn't have a point. It was transformative. But, ow. And the thing that you're talking about, community, I say this all the time, when you talked about, when we moved away from matriarchy, you talked about functionally the development of power relationships between people, and that is to say vertical hierarchies. I talk about it all the time. Patriarchal systems or vertical hierarchies, those are based in power. You're talking about horizontal organizations which are based in community, right? Which is what I think we are moving toward as individuals and inshallah collectively. One question I have, and it may seem out of left field, but in the story of Inanna visiting her sister, were they twins?
It's not mentioned that I know of.
I just think of the Kabbalian's principle of polarity. I think of Thomas being the author of the Gospel of Thomas, and he was, Didymus, Thomas, Christ's twin. The idea of existing like, opposites are identical in nature but different by degree. That's a whole other line of inquiry. But if I had to, if in my own headcanon, they're twins.
Yeah.
She goes to visit
No,
her twin sister,
it makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
She's called, Ereshkigal Gal's called the Great Round. She completes the circle. And so that makes a lot of sense to me, that sort of Inanna is in the overculture and the overworld, and she completes, and Ereshkigal Gal completes the circle. So that the twinning makes sense.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it's a circle.
I was going to say, it's also instructive that Anana's community was correct when they said, don't go down there, they'll kill you.
That's right. You're not going to make it.
Yeah.
It's not that they were lying to her. They weren't trying to trick her. They weren't confused. They were no, you'll die.
Yeah.
It'll be terrible.
Legit
and
scary.
She's like, I'm going to go anyway.
Yeah.
And then she went, and then she died, and it was terrible.
That's right. 100%.
But she came back, and yeah.
How did
That's
she come
exactly
back?
right.
I need to know the ending, because last I heard she was hung up on a coat hook, and I'm like, and?
I'm at the end of the episode, and I'm just that's the only image I have in my head.
It's beautiful.
I'm very invested in this 4 millennia old story.
So before she went down, she asked her waiting woman, she said, if I'm not back in 3 days and 3 nights, send help. And so Inanna was on the wall for 3 days and 3 nights. And Ninshabar, her waiting woman, went to the fathers in the text. It says she went to the fathers and said, Inanna's down there and we need to send help. And they all said, no, we told her not to go. These are my, I'm paraphrasing, but they're we told her not to go. It's horrible down there. Don't go. And finally she went to, I believe it's Father Enki, but I call him the King of Hearts. This one of the fathers that was connected to the emotional realm, to the waters, to the heart. And I love this part of the story because it's such dream logic and it holds such a key and it's so beautiful. So in the story, Father Enki takes dirt from beneath his fingernails and crafts these little creatures from the dirt beneath his fingernails that are neither male nor female. And he says, when you go into the underworld, you will come into Ereshkigal Gal's chamber, and she will be crying out, and you won't be able to tell whether it's agony or ecstasy, and you won't be able to tell whether she's dying or giving birth. And when she cries, "Oh my heart," cry, "Oh your heart," and when she cries, "Oh my liver," cry, "Oh your liver." And there's these stanzas of things that she's crying out, and he says, "Cry out with her." And so these little creatures go down into the underworld and slip through the 7 gates and find Ereshkigal, and they grieve with her. And finally, after her grieving and her saying, "Oh my heart," and them saying, "Oh your heart," she stops and she thanks them, and she says, "What can I give you?" And they say, we would like Inanna's body." And so they go over and they take Inanna's body down, and they bring like bread and water, and Inanna comes back to life and goes to leave the underworld. And Ereshkigal says, basically, nobody gets out alive. Like, you're not allowed to leave. You have to leave something behind. And Ereshkigal says, "I'll take your waiting woman, Ninshabar." And Inanna says, no, I can't do that. And Ereshkigal gives all these offers, and Inanna says no. And finally, Ereshkigal asks for Inanna's husband, Dumuzi. And Inanna says, "Yes, you can have my husband, Dumuzi," because as she's been down in the underworld, he's been up there not grieving. He didn't grieve her loss. And so she's saying, like, it's your turn to come down to the underworld. And then there's these great scenes of these demons that come out of the underworld and go chase down Dumuzi, and he like runs from land to land and like looks for help and has to be, and he's dragged down, and he doesn't say yes, he's dragged down into the underworld. He's dragged down. Yeah. And very interesting, like these masculine and feminine archetypes, which are so complex and really tricky to talk about these days, but he can't hang, right? Like, he can't do it. He can't bear the suffering of the underworld. And so his sister, out of compassion, splits his time in the underworld. So he spends half of his time in the underworld, and she takes his other half of his turn.
It's very Persephone, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the word commiserate, which has Latin roots. It's 2 words, com, with, and miserere, which is wretchedness or lamentation. So to literally grieve is to grieve with, right? When you use that word grief, and the husband's avoidance of grief, which is the avoidance of suffering, but also the avoidance of intimacy and connection. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, he's fated to go.
Because it's scary and it hurts.
Because it's scary and it hurts, which immediately, guess what? Sends him to the place that is scary and hurts, So to be participatory in your own life, or with your own suffering or with other suffering, to commiserate with people is actually the way out.
Yeah.
By going through.
Right. The thing about grief, I'll say this, we think that it is an ending, and it is a portal. Grief is a doorway. And my experience with grief, and others who work like Inanna, going intentionally into this place, particularly with grief, to touch bottom, is that when there's this, and you got to go slow, because it'll blow your circuits. We can only take so much at a time. It has to be titrated. But that when there's a true, pure experience of grief, and it's fully felt, that it flips to ecstasy. And that's a really strange thing to say, but I've experienced it and felt it. It's like this, it's such a place of pure aliveness, of this pure wild aliveness and connection and humanness, that this intense grief that you don't think you can bear, it's that moment of Ereshkigal. It's that birth, it's like birth and death combined. It's polarity in unity, and it's ecstasy. And I think that that's extraordinary. And that's why I keep thinking, like, I'm going to graduate out of like wanting to talk about grief. We're going to be talking about joy soon. It's just the teacher. She's just my teacher, and keeps teaching. And is it also going down into the underworld or going through grief is death practice. And we die and don't die. And then when we die and don't die, we aren't afraid to live. And when we aren't afraid to live, then we can be on this planet fully and maybe face some of the problems that are here.
in the Dhammapada, Buddha says, be a lamp unto yourself and cling to no external refuge. Let the truth be your refuge. And facing scary and painful things is facing the truth and being present with those things. And being present, of course, is existing in the only time that is real, which is the eternal now. And I think that is the garden gate that allows one into joy.
If you don't feel the grief, you can't feel the joy, because grief harrows the path that the river of joy runs through.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. That's it.
So it's not like you're not talking about joy. It's almost like
Right.
you're talking. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the path. It's the path. It's so many of us have consciously gone through dark nights of the soul, right? With this broader understanding, with this bigger understanding that this is the work of being a human. And I've gone through it many times unconsciously, where it's just like, oh my God, life is horrific and it's happening to me and there is no purpose and there is no meaning and there's nothing. And I've also gone through conscious journeys into the underworld that are quite different. And I think right now, the collective is going through a great underworld journey. And I think a lot of the collective does not know that there's a point of transformation possible. And grief is the teacher. And that is really scary to see happen on a collective level, because those of us who have gone into this journey know that there's no guarantee that you actually make it through. Like, it is shattering. And what helps us make it through is Ninshabar, is our waiting, the person that's like, hey, I'm going down. Can you watch the door? Can grace arrive? So it's community, and I mean community in this community right here of 3 right now. And I also mean the beings, the dead, the others, all of these, like the unseen world and grace itself and the mystery itself and all of these things, like the community, the company that we have access to that we forget that we have access to. But that's actually how we make it through. Those of us who have done this, who have gone on this journey, can hold the knowing that with every death there's a birth, and also not bypass how hard death is.
Grief is in many ways the admission that there are things that are beyond your control, which we don't like and is painful. You don't want your grandmother to die. It hurts. And so that feels disempowering, literally. I do not have the power to change these circumstances. However, creativity by its nature is empowerment and agency. And one does not negate the other. In fact, they walk hand in hand. The acceptance and understanding that, let the truth be your refuge. Allowing the truth to be your refuge means letting go of some things, but agency is always right there with you, and creativity is the expression of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a both and. As I was again told by one of my mentors, like it's the price of admission to what we can create as humans in this threshold that we're crossing. Is the price of admission is being able to hold paradox. That's where it approaches non-duality, that grief and love are 2 sides of the same coin, and that light and dark are actually not separate, and that the great round is a great round. It's all of it. And that we've pushed half of it into the underworld, and it's a reclaiming of that. And it's the only thing that I know to do in these times is go down and in, yeah.
Oh God, I'm reminded of that Rilke poem. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. There's so much that is legitimately ours that we have been told or made to believe are not ours. Mm-hmm. And it isn't just grief and love and joy. We were talking with Kelly Chase about our great inheritance as human beings in terms of things like psi abilities, intuition, all of the things that you talk about, the gifts of the goddess, and all of these beautiful things that we are now coming to an understanding on the Western side of things, on the materialist side, like, oh, there's way more to it than we were told. And every time we tried to talk about it, we were told to be quiet or it's not crazy. I've told this story before, but I'll tell you, my mom used to communicate telepathically with my aunt, and they did it for years. And one day my aunt came to me, and they lived many states apart. My aunt came to me and goes, why did Nancy stop talking to me? And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. And I said, Mom, why'd you stop talking to Betty? And she goes, oh, that stuff's not real.
Yeah.
And I was like, you were doing it. I can't do it. If I was able to do it, I would. But it was too jarring, I think. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
I mean, there's a huge, there for all of us, not just women, but for all of us, there's a witch wound, that in the West, in our culture and in our, the religions that shaped us and shaped our psyches for the most part, it was not only dismissed, it was physically unsafe to express these things. You were killed. Millions were killed, I think upwards of 1 million people were killed for exactly this, for some connection to some mysterious unseen realm. And that lives in us. That's been passed down. That lives in our bodies. And we can look around the culture and see that there aren't safe places for this. I think we have an opportunity now, as people have more understanding than ever about these things and about our inner worlds and about shadow work and about, the psyche and about somatics and the body, that we can create communities that are as safe as they can be. There's always going to be some unsafety, but that have some real safety and maturity to help us cross these thresholds back into, to reclaiming these parts of ourselves that are ours. Like you said, these are ours. This is us. This is who we are. And we've had this experiment to cut it away and see what that's like. And we find ourselves here. And now we have an opportunity to come back. Yeah.
We do. This has refreshed my soul. It's been such a wonderful conversation. I suppose we should button it like actual broadcasters, but I really just want to thank you and wish you every good thing. And I know we'll be speaking again, if for no other reason than Mal needs to get a scoop of this. She's so conspicuous in her absence. So please come back.
We are languishing. I think
we're over here flailing.
No, I was going to say I think I've got a button for you, Tom. And
okay, button me, Daddy.
Okay, you can put your stamp of approval on this or not, Robin. But a community is nothing more or less than people who love each other, which is the willingness to show up and to be with people in their hardest moments and to share the things that are the most difficult. It's to borrow some language from my own faith tradition. It's to mourn with those that mourn and to comfort those that stand in need of comfort. The takeaway for me is that you're never going to be alone if you choose to face the grief. When you choose to take that portal and to take that path and to try to get to that joy, to try to touch the ground, that you're not alone when you do that. And that's what makes it okay to face the grief and to face the pain. And so I'm going to take that with me. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really beautiful.
If you're new here, be sure to check out our Substack, where you can find a lot more cool stuff and share your own stories with us. Just head over to godsghostsufos.com or find the link in the description. Also, a quick reminder that no matter where you're listening, reviews really, really help other people find the show. So, hint, hint, please leave us one. All right, thanks again. See ya.